The case of April Tinsley is a heart-wrenching example of the devastating consequences of child abduction and the importance of perseverance in the pursuit of justice.
On April 1, 1988, a date that fell on Good Friday, 8-year-old April Marie Tinsley disappeared while walking home from a friend's house on South Hannah Street in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
She had been heading back to her family's home near the intersection of South Hannah and East Masterson Avenue when she vanished.
Her disappearance launched a massive search effort across Allen County, and for 3 agonizing days, her family and the community held out hope that she would be found alive.
On April 4, 1988, that hope was shattered.
April's body was discovered in a ditch along a rural road in DeKalb County, Indiana, roughly 20 miles from where she had last been seen. An autopsy determined that she had been sexually assaulted and strangled. Despite an immediate canvass of the surrounding farmland, investigators found no witnesses to the dumping of her body and recovered limited physical evidence at the scene.
The case was assigned to the Fort Wayne Police Department and the Allen County Sheriff's Department, and a joint task force was assembled. Detectives interviewed hundreds of people in the weeks that followed, but no suspect emerged. For 2 years, the investigation ground forward with little public development. Then, in 1990, a chilling message appeared scrawled on a barn wall along U.S. Route 30 in rural Allen County. It read, "I kill April Marie Tinsley."
The message stunned investigators and terrified the community. Handwriting analysts and forensic specialists were brought in to examine the writing, and the barn was processed for fingerprints and trace evidence. The brazenness of the act suggested a perpetrator who was not only local but confident he would not be caught. Despite the new lead, detectives were unable to connect the message to any known suspect in their files. The killer's silence lasted more than a decade before he surfaced again. In 2004, a series of disturbing notes began appearing on the bicycles of young girls in the Fort Wayne area.
The notes contained threatening language and references to April Tinsley's murder.
Even more critically, the notes were accompanied by used condoms, which the author had deliberately left behind.
Forensic technicians extracted DNA from the condoms and the sealed envelopes, giving investigators their first viable biological profile of the suspect.
The DNA was entered into CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system, but no match was returned.
The suspect had never been arrested or convicted of a felony that would have placed his profile in the database. Throughout the mid-2000s, the Fort Wayne Police Department publicly appealed for information, releasing details about the notes and asking anyone who recognized the handwriting to come forward. April's mother, Janet Tinsley, made repeated appearances in local media, pleading for the public's help in keeping her daughter's name in the news. Community organizations in Fort Wayne held annual vigils on the anniversary of April's abduction, and a scholarship fund was established in her name at a local elementary school.
Despite these efforts, the identity of the man behind the DNA remained unknown. By 2010, advances in forensic technology allowed investigators to develop a more detailed genetic profile, but the critical step of matching it to a specific individual remained elusive.
The Fort Wayne Police Department partnered with the Indiana State Police and the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit to review the totality of the evidence, including the psychological significance of the 1990 barn message and the 2004 bicycle notes. Profilers concluded that the offender likely lived or worked within a short radius of both Fort Wayne and the DeKalb County dump site, and that his decision to taunt investigators suggested a personality driven by a need for control and attention. This assessment helped narrow the geographic focus of the investigation but did not produce a name. The breakthrough came in the spring of 2018 when the Fort Wayne Police Department sent the preserved DNA evidence to Parabon Nanolabs, a Virginia-based company specializing in genetic genealogy.
Parabon's analysts uploaded the DNA profile to GEDmatch, a public genealogy database where individuals voluntarily share their genetic information. By identifying distant relatives of the suspect in the database, analysts were able to construct a partial family tree and work backward through public records, census data, and genealogical archives. Within weeks, the family tree pointed toward a single individual living in Grable, Indiana, a small community located just northeast of Fort Wayne. That individual was John D. Miller, a 59-year-old man who had lived in the Grable area for most of his life.
On July 15, 2018, investigators collected a DNA sample from Miller's trash and sent it for comparison against the evidence from the 2004 notes and the original crime scene. The results were conclusive. Miller's DNA was a match. Later that same day, officers arrived at Miller's home and placed him under arrest. During a subsequent interrogation, Miller confessed to abducting, assaulting, and killing April Tinsley 30 years earlier. He told detectives that he had grabbed her off the street while driving through Fort Wayne on the evening of April 1, 1988. Miller's confession provided details that only the killer could have known. He described the route he drove after abducting April, the location in DeKalb County where he left her body, and the clothing she had been wearing. He also admitted to writing the message on the barn in 1990 and to leaving the notes and condoms on the bicycles in 2004. When asked why he had taunted investigators, Miller offered no coherent explanation, saying only that he had felt compelled to do it. His admissions corroborated every major piece of physical and forensic evidence that the task force had accumulated over 3 decades. In the months following his arrest, Miller's background was scrutinized by both law enforcement and the media. He had no prior felony convictions, which explained why his DNA had never appeared in Cody's.
He had worked various manual labor jobs in and around Allen County for decades and had managed to avoid drawing serious attention from law enforcement.
Neighbors in Grable described him as quiet and largely unremarkable. The revelation that he had been living within 25 miles of April's family for 30 years was deeply unsettling to the Fort Wayne community.
On March 29, 2019, John D.
Miller appeared in an Allen County courtroom and entered a guilty plea to the murder and sexual assault of April Marie Tinsley. Under the terms of a plea agreement, Miller was sentenced to 80 years in prison, the maximum sentence available under Indiana law at the time of the offense.
Because the crime occurred in 1988, the death penalty was not pursued as an option under the applicable statutes. At the sentencing hearing, members of April's family delivered impact statements describing the decades of grief and uncertainty they had endured.
Janet Tinsley addressed the court directly, telling Miller that he had stolen her daughter's future and that no sentence could ever restore what was lost.
The resolution of April Tinsley's case was widely cited as a landmark moment for the use of genetic genealogy in criminal investigations. It followed closely behind the arrest of Joseph James D'Angelo, the suspected Golden State Killer, whose identification in April 2018 also relied on GEDmatch and Parabon nanolabs. Together, these cases demonstrated that decades-old cold cases with preserved DNA evidence could be solved even when the suspect had no prior criminal record. In the years since Miller's arrest, genetic genealogy has been used to identify suspects in hundreds of cold cases across the United States, fundamentally altering the landscape of forensic investigation. April Marie Tinsley was buried at Concordia Cemetery in Fort Wayne. She is remembered by her family, her classmates, and a community that never stopped searching for answers.
The scholarship fund established in her name continues to support students in the Fort Wayne area, and the annual vigil on the anniversary of her abduction still draws attendees more than 3 decades after her death.
Her case stands as a record of what can happen when investigators refuse to set a file aside, when a family refuses to let a name be forgotten, and when science catches up to a crime that once seemed beyond solving.